Is it always going to be a max 5 rep?
So the advanced novice program is not a 5 RM, it's 3 sets of 5, but on a squat, for instance, twice per week. And deadlift, 1 set of 5, once per week. So all you have done is you've changed the 3 sets of 5 you would normally do on day 2 to 2 sets of 5 at 80% of day 1. So it's a light squat day. So your test of improvement is the second squat day, being able to go up a weight for a set of 5. And by definition, if you can do 3 sets of 5, it's not a 5 RM. Right? Now, if you were doing Texas method, which I should state abundantly clear that I do not recommend for anybody, ever, then theoretically, yes. Your test, your objective test in your adaptation would be, does your 5 RM keep going up? Okay? But I should state clearly yet again, that I do not like Texas method for anybody. It's been, so here's how this went. Texas method originally started out as the program you run after starting strength, right? Except for people started figuring out, this doesn't really work that well for me. They have to modify it significantly to a point where it no longer resembles Texas method. But then we say, yeah, I did Texas method, but it was modified. So then the thought process was, well, it's good. It's not good if you're older. Right? It's not good if you're older because most of the people who were training at that time who were active on the forums were not teenagers. So the thought was, we just give it to, it's good for teenagers probably. But I would disagree with that as well based on when you analyze the volume, the volume is not higher than the novice progression. The frequency is not higher than the novice progression. The intensity is not necessarily higher based on relative to what you would see in the novice progression. So how do you increase the stress that's being applied? All that's done is you're accumulating stress over a longer interval, but it's less stress. So I don't think that the Texas method is appropriate for anyone. And I'm hoping that if I just troll Rip enough, he'll pull it out and pull it. But you've seen the sort of how this has changed though, because now there are multiple different variations of the Texas method that have made its way into practical program. 4-day split, different other block periodization type models, which ultimately correct for all of these problems with original Texas method. So anyway, I just had to go on.
With that, and it would increase their testosterone, or would it negatively?
So I don't remember specifically commenting on antidepressants as they pertain to testosterone.
Maybe you're talking antipsychotics.
Talked about
that's what it was.
So I was talking about antidepressants and antipsychotics more in the mainly the antipsychotics in the context of cholesterol measurements and lipid panels and stuff like that, which is a separate topic from testosterone. But so I was talking about antipsychotics in the context of adverse changes to your cholesterol panel, and that's the consequences of that. But what I think you're asking, what I would summarize is if those medicines are necessary to allow someone to function and therefore get out of bed in the morning and go train, then I'm more concerned with that than what it might do to a little fluctuation in some hormone level. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Like if they need it to function, are you going to take away the medicine that allows them to function so that you might get some favorable improvement in a hormone level while they'll be crippled with depression, unable to get out of bed and go to the gym, right?
I'm leaning a little more towards the anxiety side of it rather than depression.
Well, similar deal. You can be crippled by anxiety, not wanting to go out and, agoraphobia and things like that, not wanting to go out in public. So yeah, it's like to the extent that I can get someone to function and go train, that's my primary concern. If I'm messing with someone's hormone levels, then that's a detail I can work on later.
It's awfully smug.
Not really.
More interestingly.
Take it away.
Well, so because the base of the question, or the crux of the question, what I interpreted from you asking was that, does it matter does exercise increase testosterone, and if this lowered testosterone, would that compromise training to a point where would you consider stopping it? And so for all the reasons that Austin mentioned, I wouldn't consider stopping it. And then further, the testosterone response to training is not that it's negligible and that they don't change, it just doesn't, it's irrelevant.
Okay.
Further, I will state that the difference between, if your testosterone went from 400 to 600, doesn't matter. You're in the within normal range. Austin sent me a paper, this was probably about 6 months ago, where they looked at the testosterone levels of males and females and how they did in relation to different strength tests. Okay, on average, males with the lower testosterone levels within the physiological normal range outperformed those with the higher levels of testosterone within the normal range. Okay, and females had the opposite. Females with the higher levels of testosterone outperformed other females who had lower. Well, so the way I took this to be, so when you train, okay, your cortisol levels go up. Okay, if you have an overload event, your cortisol levels go up. That's one of the normal hormonal responses, which ultimately compromises your testosterone level in the short term, right? So if you had people train frequently and then test them on a strength test, right, I would expect those who trained more often to have somewhat lower testosterone levels than those who didn't train more often. So, like, duh.
Because it's being acutely suppressed.
Because it's being acutely suppressed. So, yeah, duh, the more trained people did better at a strength test. Right. Still doesn't explain the females neatly, you know, but I just thought it was cool. Because everyone's super concerned, like, oh, should I eat more saturated fats, or should I do this certain thing, take vitamin D, or should I do this other thing that's going to take my testosterone from 350 to 400? It's like, that doesn't matter. 300, 600 doesn't matter.
Physiologic changes within the physiologic range haven't really been shown to correlate with significant changes in long-term outcomes when it comes to this stuff. So that's the idea. People tend to overinterpret the significance of those fluctuations.
Yeah.
And that's, again, speaking to what I was talking about yesterday during the testosterone lecture, as it related to, like, why are we checking, right? You have to have a reason to check these things. So if somebody's training's going well, they don't have symptoms that I talked about in that lecture and stuff like that, then why are you measuring and worrying about these numbers? You're probably doing more harm freaking out about a 25-point change in your testosterone level, which is probably better explained by that diurnal rhythm and all those other things I talked about than any real significant change in your physiology. So not something worth worrying about. Yeah.
I'm just trying to optimize, bro. Just trying to optimize. You got an injury from lowering calories too?
From underdoing, I guess. It was just
Could be.
too much too often.
Yeah, so I mean, I think when you talk about injuries in relation to nutrition, that's tough to necessarily correlate. So, and you'll hear from other sources that, oh, your knees hurt or your back hurts, so you probably just need to gain weight. And I don't necessarily know if that's true unless somebody's markedly underweight. And the experience of pain is multifactorial anyway. So, all right, let's get back to these nutritional recommendations. So I do think that if you start with 1 gram a pound body weight protein and 1 gram pound body weight for carbs, and then 1/3 of your body weight in fat, that's a fine starting point, right? Unless you have other data that you've been tracking your nutrition for a long period of time, in which case I would use that data and go less on the carbs and fat from there. Does that make sense? So if you have data that you've been tracking in MyFitnessPal or an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, and you were at, 200 grams of protein and 300 grams of carbs and 100 grams of fat a day, well, I would just take some off your carbs and fat, see what happens over 2 weeks, and go down. And I think making changes in that 200 calorie range is probably what I do most. I don't do like 500 calorie, just take it off the top, and I think that's too much, just from my personal experience. But more interestingly, I think the biggest issue is going to be your programming, right? So not necessarily with how your weight loss does overall, but how you're be able to productively train. So I would say that if most of your volume is in that 70 to 80% range, that your injury risk likely goes down. And training is actually productive too, so you get that benefit. Luckily, we have a ton of free stuff on the Barbell Medicine website. Yeah, so I think I would do that.
Yeah, you have to be.
Book on intermediate training.
We should, yeah. Just do that, yeah.
Yeah, you have to pay attention to basically what your intermediate programming is asking of you if you're going to be in a caloric deficit.
So just
Right.
lower calories a little bit, see how it goes.
Exactly what I would do.
Too much.
And reassess frequently, and you're going to have to adjust your programming so that you are not expecting yourself to pull off an all-time 3RM PR triple every week, or you know what I mean?
Is that the Kentucky method?
Yeah.
Because it's 3 and 5. You got it.
Make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
Do you feel like you got everything out you wanted to talk about? I mean, I feel like everything was pretty good.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this experience was unique. And we talked about this even before we started yesterday, that we were kind of like, when we go do a starting strength seminar, for instance, we've heard the seminar and all the lectures so many times, and we've done all the lectures so many different times that we know the flow, we know where the jokes go, we know how people are going to respond. I'm serious. You know it. This thing, we're flying blind. The categories or the topics that we picked, we were just personally interested in, and they're highly relevant to the sort of primary care, general health sort of standpoint. So we had a general idea of like what we wanted to do, and I think what I found was that I would pick more specific topics. That way I can fully flesh them out versus, a topic like high blood pressure, you're like, oh, well, I could probably cover that in an hour or 90 minutes. And then you start thinking about, there's a bunch of training related modalities that if I want to cover the research there, that's going to take some time to unpack. And then nutrition, that's going to take some time to unpack. And supplements, that's going to take some time to unpack. So I think, it will improve as we go. So years from now, when we're giving this seminar, it's probably going to be different. But I don't feel resentment. I actually, it's cool because if my patients were as into their own health and into this stuff as you guys were, I would have a very easy day treating patients. Then I wouldn't have to convince them, right? So the question we get from other doctors when we're like on Instagram or doing a podcast is, how do you get your patients to train, right? And it's like, well, usually they ask us about it. And that's the person that you want to invest the time and invest that sort of those resources in. The other people, you're trying to convince them, and sometimes you don't have the right words to say, and you don't have the right,
Or you don't have the time.
Yeah, the time, yeah. So that's a big deal. But you guys are already bought in. You're like, yeah, I want my squat to go up, and I want my health to go up. We're like, cool.
Yeah.
let me at it. That's my experience.
Yeah, no, I know that there's other topics that I would have wanted to talk about. There's stuff that I actually prepared a lecture on and didn't end up putting it in here at all. And so, sorry. So when I talked about pain this morning, the pain science stuff, and then back pain, the other topic that I was preparing to talk about was like more of an acute injury management type of thing, and tendinopathy. I had stuff on all that I was going to talk about because that's super common stuff that we see more in the training population than in like our patient populations, for example. So yeah, I agree. This thing, just like the starting strength seminar or any other seminar out there, is going to evolve over time. And so I told the couple guys who had to go earlier that everyone's going to be getting an email after this, requesting kind of like feedback, things you like, didn't like, things that could be done better, things you would have liked to hear about, all that kind of stuff, and that'll help us make it kick-ass in the future.
After something like that.
Yeah. So
After knee replacement.
Yeah, so typically after a knee replacement, those people by default are going to get referred to get rehab right afterwards. And so the question is, are you seeing these people before they've been through that process, or are you seeing them after they've been through that process? If you're seeing them after they've been through that process, then not much. You just kind of have to go through the same assessment that you would with anyone else. Can they get themselves below parallel? Can they stand up from below parallel? If not, you might need to have them leg press or box squat or something like that, and work them up from there. You probably assume if you're not a therapist already, then you're probably not going to be seeing them before they've been through that process. But I know some of our coaches have rehab people starting right after those procedures. So they approach it similarly, just stress, recovery, adaptation. Find a way to stress them.
Yeah, the important thing would be that there is no test that you need to perform in your clinic, which is a gym, to see if they can squat or not outside of squatting, right? Provided they are walking without assistance. Right. As an anecdotal story, my dad had a knee replacement November 2015, and then in January he started squatting and squatted up, I think in the high 200s, like 285 or something like that, 3 sets of 5, 63 years old at the time, so.
No special recommendations to like a full knee replacement to a partial?
No. The rehab in general is faster for partial. My dad had full. Ultimately, again, they're going to get in at-home physical therapy usually, where they just come in and do range of motion stuff, and they leave them for dead because what physical therapist is going to make your client squat after a knee replacement? You just take it easy, just like basically just
advice for anything.
Just die later. Yeah. Enjoy life and die. And but yeah, once their range of motion is sufficient, and they can walk without assistance, you can have squat. And if they can't squat below parallel, and you should have a leg press available or above parallel box squat,
Yeah.
that's what you do.
Or, I guess the top levels.
So, yeah, I've had almost all of them at some point, and I've let them expire, mainly to let them know that I don't want to pay them anymore. The deal is you're going to need something that is nationally accredited in order to get a job in a commercial facility or facility that you don't own. All right, that doesn't protect you from anything. Their insurance is junk anyway. But what you're looking for is something that allows you to get a job at a facility, all right, that's nationally recognized and doesn't cost you a ton of money, right? So the things that fulfill that criteria the best are either the ACSM, American College of Sports Medicine, or the NSCA, National Strength and Conditioning Association. If you have a college degree, you can get the CSCS from the NSCA, or you can get the HFS, which is the Health and Fitness Specialist from the ACSM. Both of those are going to run you about $300 to take the test and get some material that you need to prepare for the test. Compare that to NASM, which can be a double or more for that, and the material is no better. Look, the material across the board is junk. Okay, the ACSM is not putting out good material. The NSCA is not putting out good material. NASM's never put out good material. All right, you're paying for a piece of paper that somebody at that commercial facility is going to recognize, and you don't want to spend a bunch of money on it. So don't go get the $1,000 one. Get the $300 one, and ACSM and NSCA fit that criteria. As far as other actual certifications that are worthwhile to get, I would say the USA Track and Field Level 1 is pretty good. That's actually what the starting strength certification is based off of, and it is nationally accredited. However, most gym facilities wouldn't recognize that as a primary certification, but it is useful to have, and the information is really good. Obviously, the starting strength certification, once you've been coaching for a while, particularly this method, is useful, and it will get you business, unlike any of these other certifications, except for maybe the track and field one. And the only other one that I would ever tell somebody to get is the Titleist Golf Pro certification. The material is worse than bad. However, you get listed on a very short list of people who's qualified and certified to do strength and conditioning for golfers. The good thing about golfers is that they have money. So I'm serious though. Yeah. So the issue is that you don't want to spend a ton of money for information that's ultimately bad, and you want it to drive business to you.
Yeah.
And no primary cert that's going to be accepted anywhere is going to give you good information, right? CrossFit cert's junk. Okay, they don't have a good one. No offense, I've been to the level 1, got it. I bought their coach's prep course just to go through and troll them. So I'll give you an example what's in the coach's prep course, right? You're supposed to evaluate a squat. And they have a person squatting with their knees a little bit forward over their toes, and it appears that their weight's balanced over the middle of the foot. Well, how do I know this? Because their heels aren't in the air and their toes aren't in the air, which means that probably, now based on this static picture, that the weight's balanced over the middle of the foot. You're supposed to identify the errors. The errors are that the weight's not in their heels and that their knees went forward, which you shouldn't squat like that. But that's an anthropometry issue, right? If your weight's in your heels, you're off balance. So that's wrong, CrossFit. That's wrong, CrossFit. And your knees going forward of your toes is a direct function of how long your femurs are, right? And how vertical or horizontal your torso is. I can squat with vertical shins if I bend over like this, but what are the CrossFit trainers telling you to do? Oh, you got to keep a vertical torso. Well, how in the hell am I supposed to keep a vertical torso without letting my knees go forward? It's somebody who has never really assessed the squat in a way outside of that circle jerk they call a level 1, put together this course, and ultimately have been charging a bunch of money for it. Okay? So anyway, back to my recommendation.
Don't do that.
NSCA, CSCS, do you have a college degree? Okay, so NSCA CPT, or the ACSM CPT, there's both their certified personal trainer thing. They don't require you to have a college degree. If you are a senior level standing or higher, you can take the CSCS or the ACSM HFS. Both allow you to take those while you're a senior. Those would be options. And then after that, you can get the USA Track and Field. And if you're really money hungry and greedy, you can get the Titleist cert, so you can train golfers. I just think training John Daly would be dope. Like he brings you.
I coached a former PGA Tour golfer.
Yeah, he bring you Diet Coke and cigarettes. Sounds great. Can you imagine between sets?
Is that in your mentor?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. He goes, if I don't smoke this, I would eat M&Ms. Right? They actually asked him, they go, why do you drink so much Diet Coke? And he goes, every time I drink a water, I make a bogey, so I just drink soda. I'm like, it's great. It's smart. Yeah.
As they both have instantaneous, you get a trauma. As the pain, you feel the pain,
Yes.
the fight or flight kicks in, how
Yes.
that kind of ties together.
Yes, excellent question. So you remember when I talked about when you get the nociceptive, the noxious stimulus in the periphery, right? It gets sent up to the brain and it's processed in a number of different ways. You remember the ways it was processed? Cognition, memory, attention, and emotion, right? So if you're in a situation where you have the fight or flight response going on, you have this surge of hormones, the acute stress hormones, right? The cortisol, norepinephrine, epinephrine, stuff like that. In the setting of this noxious stimulus, scary situation, fight or flight, that actually amplifies the processing in the memory and the emotion centers, right? That's how it ends up being traumatic to you. And it further solidifies the encoding of that memory in your brain as a traumatic memory, right? And then down the line you might have, I don't know how tightly this is woven in, it probably is tightly woven in to a degree with things like PTSD and flashbacks and stuff like that, right? But that acute fight or flight response, those hormones definitely further solidify the processing of said stimulus in the emotion and memory centers of your brain.
So it would make the pain worse in the future, potentially. But what about the instantaneous pain? Just fight or flight or flight?
Right, so instantaneously, again, remember, the way that the pain is perceived depends hugely on the context. So in the setting, it might end up hurting worse. But you could also have situations where because of that response, in an effort to, I need to get my ass out of here, you actually don't feel the pain at all. And this is how you sometimes hear these war stories about guys who've been shot through the arm or had a limb partially severed or something like that, and they get themselves to safety, and then all of a sudden they look down and they're like, oh shit. And everyone's like, oh, you were in shock, you didn't feel it. Well, kind of a weird word to describe it, but that's basically what it's describing. So it's kind of, I would say, an individual response, but that can acutely amplify, or it can acutely kind of suppress the perception of pain. Again, all depending on the context. Context influences everything significantly. Super interesting topic.